You've all been treated to a steady diet of pundits, experts, and economists warning about the cataclysm that will result from the U.S. not raising our debt ceiling. And there is a danger. The full faith and credit of the United States would be sacrificed, but not because of the debt ceiling, but because we have a deficiency of pro-American leadership in Washington. If the debt ceiling isn't raised and then we have a default, we'll have confirmation of how vapid, vacuous, and unqualified the majority of Washington is. We'll have it confirmed that the vast majority of Americans chose very poorly at the ballot box. Default and a hard debt ceiling, not the same things. That's the reality that I want to remind you of in today's preamble. This morning I got an email from one of you. It made me think. Tom writing, in part, I am a recent convert to your broadcasts and appreciate your views, almost always. I want to make a comment about the default panic we hear all day, every day. Maybe this is not a bad thing to not raise the debt limit. Connecting default to not raising the debt ceiling is not exactly real. The IRS collects taxes every day, so all we will not be able to do is create more debt if the debt ceiling were not raised. Tom reminded me of things that I've been telling you folks for years. First, tax cuts don't produce debt. Only overspending produces debt. Secondly, who gave Congress permission to spend more money than we give them in taxes? I certainly didn't. I know you didn't. They just do it. Thirdly, we are burdened with unserious simpletons who are the equivalent of children. That is who makes up the majority of Congress, both parties. The majority has abandoned debate and prioritizing how our tax dollars are spent because the two-party system is an illusion. Both sides get together in a back room and agree to spend money on everything their hearts desire. Not our hearts, theirs. These politicians, not leaders, have taken to using our tax dollars to pay off their donors, to buy votes, and enrich themselves. Now, by the time they're done with all of that stuff, and then they add money to the nation's credit card to handle the jobs that they were actually hired to do. And in that order, we the people are the last concern for the majority in Washington. This coupled with the fact that establishment children have stopped budgeting, and you get a massive $32 trillion in debt as interest rates creep up to fight all of the inflation-causing overspending both Republicans and Democrats agreed to do. You get a massive circular problem here. Tax data shows that your government took in nearly $5 trillion from our people in 2022, $4.9 trillion in collected revenue to be exact. Now consider this. The Treasury Department paid a record $213 billion in interest payments on the national debt in the last quarter of 2022 alone. That's up $63 billion from the same period a year earlier. That's one quarter, folks, of 2022. Now, over 4 quarters, 1 year's time, with rising interest rates and an ever-ballooning principal, the interest on our debt alone is approaching $1 trillion a year. That's paying not one penny of our debt down, just servicing interest. In other words, 1 of every 5 of our tax dollars goes to just treading water, servicing the debt. Not one member of your Congress, and certainly nobody in that White House, is talking about paying down 1 penny of principal off our debt. Not 1 penny. The best the GOP can do is to reduce the rate of increase. There have been no cuts in spending year to year and no reduction in our national debt since I've been alive. We not only have an annual deficit in dollars and cents, but we have a deficit in responsible grown-ups in Washington, D.C. As you can clearly see, the United States doesn't have a taxation problem. Despite concerted propaganda to the contrary, Americans are paying their fair share. But because we keep hiring unqualified morons to run our country, they waste our tax dollars to enrich themselves, to enrich their cronies, and to cover for their myriad scandals. Americans are noticing this too. Internet memes are going viral as the U.S. faces another unforced error as we careen toward another debt ceiling, which leads us to the reality of what the debt ceiling is and what it isn't. The debt ceiling is a law constitutionally passed by duly elected members of Congress that simply says that Congress must authorize the government to put us all further in debt. Let's say the Democrats get their wish and they fail to negotiate with the House, and America's debt ceiling stays right where it is. According to government data, the U.S. government has already taken in $2.7 trillion in taxes in 2023. That money could be used to finance our debt, pay our military expenses, and have plenty of money to pay out Social Security. But there wouldn't be enough to satisfy all of our politicians' promises, payoffs, scandals, and the illegality that we've all had confirmed concerning the DOJ and FBI. In other words, our politicians would be forced to prioritize spending, something they should already be doing. And if we hit the debt ceiling for the first time, the children in government would have to make grown-up choices, the same way American families do every single day and every single month. In other words, irresponsible politicians would have to finally admit that we, the people, are not their personal piggy banks. But the fact remains that America could pay its bills and deny Joe Biden's pals in China a PR victory. Just because the debt ceiling isn't raised doesn't mean we have to default. Now, all the GOP talk of fiscal responsibility, refreshing, I got to admit, is bringing out the whack jobs. Here's noted racist and overall Democrat big mouth, Congressman Steve Cohen. Okay, apparently there's a tweet. All right, well, there was actually sound that was supposed to go with this. Anyway, deranged Tennessee Democrat Rep. Steve Cohen says Republicans are terrorists for demanding fiscal responsibility and the debt ceiling. House GOP voting to raise the debt ceiling and curbing, not reversing future overspending. That's terrorism to a modern-day Democrat. This comes from the same people who say that parents are terrorists for wanting to a say in how their kids are educated. This comes from the party that is targeting Catholics for simply standing up for babies to have a chance to grow up to become little taxpayers. As an aside, if the Democrats' jihad against babies hadn't been so successful, we'd actually have over 66 million more taxpayers by now. That might do wonders for tax revenue. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat this. If we hit the debt ceiling and the government has to prioritize spending, there will be pain. But it's only because the leftists in the Democrat Party and weak Republicans have allowed our government to grow beyond the consent of the governed. That's you and me, by the way. To do things our government was never intended to do by our founding fathers. One of Twitter's left-wing kooks is an influencer by the name of Ed Krasenstein, I don't know. On this post, he trumpets the USDA considering limiting certain foods and drinks like chocolate milk in GovEd schools in order to, quote, reduce children's risk of chronic disease, end quote. Now, these sugar-laden drinks, they say, would only be available in high school if this proposal is accepted. Now, that is not, nor has it ever been, government's job to do. That's the parents' job. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say the government should be able to determine what it is we eat. But they do it anyway, fully funded by your tax dollars. Now, that's just one example, a microcosm of how our government is too big and spends too much of our money. If our government had grown-ups instead of politicians overseeing it, it would be smaller government, manageable government, cost-effective government, and limited in its scope. If our government did only what it was authorized to do under our mutual compact, we wouldn't have any debt. Our massive debt keeps us from achieving full productivity and growth. It's clear the current majority in Congress and the Joe Biden White House are in way over their heads when it comes to confronting and solving these big issues. It's time we got someone in government who's up to the task. And perhaps forcing this government to live within its means for a change would have long-term benefit at the cost of short-term pain. Something we all should consider in the debt ceiling discussions.